Hi, my name is Brittany Braga, and this is my video for our discussion this week on e-waste. I did want to mention that last week I think my audio was a little bit low, so I'm going to hopefully fix that this week. And if I don't, please let me know. Please comment, because I do want to fix that so you're not maxing your volume just to listen to me talk about the topic at hand. I will probably be cutting up this video again slightly, just because when I'm stuttering and whatnot, it's just easier to have one long recording to fix up rather than multiple one-time tries. I will be looking off to the side again because I want to make sure that I'm hitting everything I want to hit and that I want to hit. And then last, my cat is in here, so I'm sorry if she's messing with something in my background. So just to start, we learned about e-waste. So e-waste is basically just any, I think the book also called it techno trash, which I thought was a little funny. But it's just unwanted like technology that is just not of use anymore, it's broken, or it's just too outdated. And it's either sent in to recycling areas, like drop-off areas, as we learn later, or just disposed of incorrectly. And it seems to not really matter what happens to it, just because it just, regardless, gets sent out of the country into these very large, already massive, very toxic landfills in places such as, I believe Ghana, Africa was mentioned, and Guiyu, China, Guiyu, in China, and I'm sure, of course, other places around the world. And it doesn't seem to only be when consumers themselves are wrongly, like, disposing of these, like just throwing them in the garbage and whatnot, but also seems to be when consumers are trying to do their part and send it into, like, a recycling area, or, like, bring it into a drop-off area, that it's the recycling company that's then making the decision to send it out instead of putting down the money to correctly recycle these products. For our TiC this week, we learn about, like, the military. And we learn, like, kind of get an insight in that because it's talking about, like, the first computers and how the internet sort of came to be in a way. I feel like this is definitely related because we're talking about e-waste, and it's sort of that insight of, like, okay, well, why is this an issue and how did we get to this point today with technology? So basically it's just talking about how, like, the first computers were, for lack of a better term, just really big, bulky calculators to help with like testing with either, like, weapons and whatnot, or just, like, other arithmetic things that the military was getting into, or testing, or like whatnot, just stuff like that. We also talk about ARPANET, which was basically what the internet had stemmed off of, and, like, what had paved the way for the internet that we use today, like the public consumer internet. And ARPANET was basically for these military big bulky calculator computers as a way for these computers to sort of not link up, but to have data in different places, I guess, for lack of a better term. They were able to have these computers in obviously different locations in the US, and instead of always needing a central computer for it all to link back to, they had created ARPANET. More as like a safety net, I guess is the best way to put it, because instead of having the central computer and God forbid anything happened to it, or it got destroyed, or it was attacked, or I don't know, just it went offline, data was still accessible by these computers in other locations. I know I kind of flew through that, and I'm sorry, but I feel like I have a lot to say for, like, the try it and the what do you think questions, so I do just sort of want to get into that because I don't want to take up everyone's time. So for the first question, we are given a link to watch a video about the Ghana situation that the reading does briefly go over. So I wasn't able to open the video. I didn't even get, like, a media box, like how on YouTube you get the little box so you can pause and play. Didn't even get that. It just says I need Flash Player 9. And I use Google Chrome, and I think a lot of browsers already, regardless of Google Chrome, just don't really support Flash Player anymore. There was also a link next to that says download now. But you click on it and you get a 404, so I don't think the file is up anymore. But I still was able to get, like, insight into the situation that we were told to look into, just because on that very same website they are linked to, there is still, like, the article that you can read instead of just, like, watching the video. Basically the situation is that these researchers are looking into just basically, like, where e-waste goes and where it's being shipped off to. They're talking to, like a research plant worker, recycling plant worker, I apologize. They are told that all incoming, like, e-waste is basically dumped into, like, this blast furnace to just burn up all the electronics and turn it to ash. And through that, like, they can sift out whatever precious metal they can use for other things, like sell. The researchers were taking, like, they took a quick note containers numbers, like tracking numbers, and through public record they were able to track it, and had weeks later realized that this container of e-waste was not burned like they were told it would be. It was now instead just at a port in Hong Kong. So they were lied to, basically. It's interesting because not only do you get to think about, like, okay, well, was the worker the one who knew what would happen to the e-waste and instead had lied about it to not, like, to kind of save face for the company? Or is it deeper than that, and that the worker had actually thought that this would be the case, and was told this and trained to think this way, and then, like, either higher ups or another portion of the company will then take portions of e-waste and send it off, so they don't have to burn everything. And the second question leads us to an interactive map that was created by Basel Action Network. It shows 200 containers filled with e-waste that were secretly tracked by Basel Action Network. Filter there, especially I believe it was on the right hand side, it was like this bar and it just had a lot of options. You can see that you can filter between CRT TVs, LCD screens, and printers. It does state the total that they had tracked of, like, those device types, and then the amount that had actually stayed in the US, and then the amount that was sent out. Out of 76 containers of CRT TVs, 62 stayed in the US, 62 full containers of CRT TVs stayed in the US, but 14 were sent out. Printers were very similar too. They had 57 containers of them, 40 stayed inside the US, and 17 were sent out. So for the most part, it seems like a handful are sent out, which is still kind of terrible. But LCD screens were basically split almost entirely in half of what stayed and what didn't. So out of 72 total containers for LCD screens, 34 stayed in the US, but 38 were just sent out to other countries. I think a lot of this comes from probably, like, the expense of recycling LCD screens. Maybe it's more expensive than that of, like, printers and CRT TVs. The next question to move on, we are asked to visit Earth 911. Just put in your location or your zip code and find the nearest drop-off location that you can go to if you have a lot of old technology. So I live in Woburn. So I just put in my zip code. I found that you can go to Staples and you can drop off, like, cell phones and a lot of little tech. Lowe's was also a part of this list, which I was kind of surprised about. And it did mention old cell phones. Then I was scrolling through, I also saw Target, and I saw Best Buy, and Best Buy I sort of assumed. When I was going through that list, it just seemed like it was mentioning cell phones. So I went back into the search, and I ended up just putting in computers, also, like, with my zip code, just to see if there was, like, any other locations that would pop up. And it seems like now, when I had done that, I got a lot more, like, not to say local areas, but, like, not so much, like, stores. The Winchester Transfer Station, the Stoneham Recycling Center, and, like, the Wilmington Computers Recycling Center. So I just want to bring up, you do want to check out the details for specific drop-off locations. I noticed that when I clicked into Staples, they had very strict guidelines, and they wouldn't take bigger items. Just seemed to be more, like, cell phones, printers, laptops, stuff like that. I also decided to look into, because I was wondering about that. They seem to be a lot less strict, and they just had, like, a bigger list of what you could take. I did also notice that on for Staples, they would only take 6 items a day per customer. I did bookmark this website because I do want to keep it handy. The fourth question, it's about, like, data and, like, hard drive wiping. And I didn't mention this before because I wanted to wait until I got to this question to sort of bring it up. And I feel like it's just not as widely known that you need to wipe your hard drive before you get rid of it and dispose of it or recycle it. Coming into this assignment, I had an idea that you needed to wipe your hard drive, and I have only previously really learned this over the past year or so, and that you can't just do, like, the surface level of, like, deleting files and move on, and I feel like a lot of people don't really know that. So in order to wipe your hard drive, you need to, if you have a Windows computer, you can go in your settings, and I believe if you go into, like, updates and security, you can go into recovery, and then you have to set it like you're going to factory reset your PC and just reset your entire PC for it to go through and just clean everything out of, like, whatever you have installed, downloaded, your hard drive as a whole. And it'll wipe all of that because just deleting it is not enough. It's talked about a lot that in these landfills, like, a lot of people won't clean out their hard drives and they'll just delete stuff and they think that's enough. But then people are then later on in these areas able to get into the hard drive, restore it, or power it on, or put it into another system and power it on. And they're able to retrieve all the sensitive information again. You have, like, your bank account information on there, or important passwords. They can either use that for themselves or then sell it off to someone who could use it. Instead of going through your Mac settings, you are given, there's a default Mac OS application that you can use instead called the disk utility, and then it'll run you through the process of wiping your hard drive and your computer. The reason why I feel like just hard drive wiping isn't as known as it should be is because I feel like when people think of resetting, like factory resetting your PC, when they're just disposing of it and getting rid of their PC or their laptop or whatever, it's just like, well, why would I spend the time and waste the energy to set that up and wait an hour for that to finish before I'm finally done with it, when I could just get rid of it and no one else is going to use it? Because I don't think people really understand that, like, there might be someone trying to go through your hard drive or find information that they can later sell off or use to their advantage. The fifth question asks us to use Greenpeace's green ranking to see our own computer manufacturer's ranking. Now, I was trying to find the most recent ranking that I could use for this, and I believe the 2017 one is like the most recent one you can use. I did mention earlier that I switched between a Windows and a Mac. So my Mac is a MacBook Air laptop that I use just on the go and usually for school anyway. But I do occasionally use my Windows, which is actually a desktop rig that it was my boyfriend's, and he bought it from iBuyPower years and years ago. But he now has a much better upgraded custom PC, so I have been using it just for my own. So because it's custom, it's a little strange for me to try and look it up, but I know it has an MSI motherboard, so I was curious to see about that. But MSI was not on the list at all. And then I was even trying to find, I was just really curious about it, and I know it's a custom built PC, so not all the parts are MSI, but I was just trying to whittle it down to something I can look at. So I did try to see if MSI even had like a parent company, because maybe if it was owned by something that was on there, I could kind of use that. No, MSI is its own thing. I looked at Apple. Apple was obviously on there. And Apple had an overall rank of B-, which was pretty nice to see. Apple scored C on resources, but it did have an A- in energy and B in chemicals. So it's good. It's better than what some of the other ones I looked at were. MSI was not on there, but I did look, and I wrote down what Asus had. And I wrote down Asus because I know some people will use Asus in their computer rigs. And I know like you can buy Asus specific built laptops and desktops, so I was trying to match as much as I can. Asus didn't do well. That was a little upsetting. The company averaged a D- with a D in both energy and resources and a D+ in chemicals. So MSI is probably not that great either. The next question asks us to look into our specific computer models to see their ranking on the CEP EAT site. So I looked up my MacBook first because that was going to be, obviously that was going to be on. I have a 2017 MacBook Air, and they do have MacBook Airs listed on their website. I'm assuming it's not a 2017 MacBook Air. I believe it was for like the M1 chip line. It was after mine. MacBook Air was listed at gold. So that was cool. I hope mine is too. Curious about MSI again. It's not on there. They didn't even have the manufacturer up there. They didn't even have like not the abbreviation. Like I didn't know this off the top of my head. They didn't have MicroStar International. They didn't have it. To move on to the what do you think questions. The first what do you think question is about like if we've ever ourselves thrown away old tech, old computers. I can't think of a specific instance, but I'm sure I have. I'm sure I never thought of it and I just threw it away. A few years ago, my family and I, we cleaned out our like TV room closet. We purged a lot, and I'm sure we threw out like the 360 and like a bunch of wires and God knows what else. So I'm assuming we could have recycled most of that stuff, especially like the old consoles, and we didn't. We threw it out. Question asks about researching products, like if we have researched products to find out if they were environmentally friendly or not. I have not. I never thought of it before when I was purchasing products. I've researched into devices that I was thinking about purchasing, but it was more for like its specs and how if people had any issues with it and if it was worth the money. Not so much how green it was to say. Will I definitely do it in the future? Yes. Last question brings up the topic on paying a recycling tax on electronic equipment that is purchased. Yes, I think this should happen. I think there should be a tax. And I think it should be added on to the initial purchase, which I know may not be like the majority opinion on it. Understand like the opposite side of it, that like they're gonna have this device for a while and they're probably not even gonna think about recycling it for years. At that rate, why would you pay the tax up front? I even wrote down that like a laptop lifespan is said to be like 3 to 5 years, and obviously not everyone follows that. I don't. For me personally, I use it until it really becomes necessary that I need an upgrade and the laptop's just like struggling on its last breath. And if that's the case, then you're thinking of like 4 years before a person even thinks about recycling it, if they even think about it. But that's the issue, is like then they might not even recycle it especially considering if there becomes a fee in order to just recycle it, a lot of people probably aren't going to want to because they see the fee and they're like, I'm not going to pay that. Why would I pay that? I'm just going to throw it in the garbage. We want to kind of curb this. And I think if there's a tax on the initial purchase of it, then they don't have to worry so much about it in the end when they do decide to recycle it. And not only that, because then obviously we want people to recycle their products and their devices, but even if they don't and they ended up throwing it in the garbage like 4 years down the line, well, hopefully at least like that money had gone into, like from the initial purchase instead, had gone into just the fun of recycling for someone else's device or to help continue the recycling of e-waste and whatnot. This was a really like just interesting topic for me, and I hope it was for other people too. I'm really excited to see how other people responded to these questions, but regardless, thank you for watching.